Hey, you're listening to Unscripted. This is Cody.
This is John.
And today we're going to have a discussion about poverty and the national debt here in America and what we should do to prepare, or maybe we shouldn't be preparing. All that and more on this week's episode of Unscripted.
Welcome to Unscripted. My name's John.
And I'm Cody.
And we are two guys who don't claim to be experts about anything. And from the name Unscripted, we find topics and we just go at them with maybe a few talking points, but we don't have a script in front of us. We are literally just talking from our hearts and what's going on, and we're processing a lot of different issues that or a lot of different topics that we just come to our mind that fascinate us.
We are both two young guys. We don't have a terrible lot of experience in a lot of this stuff, but we're just trying to get together and have honest conversations about these things.
This podcast is for us to grow individually, but we also would love if you could grow as well alongside us.
To begin with, we're probably going to just start releasing this on YouTube, and then we'll try to find a free podcast hosting website. So we appreciate your feedback in the comments. Try to keep it constructive. And maybe someday we'll do a question and answers podcast if this thing ever gets off the ground.
But anyway, so starting off, seeing as how both of us are Christians, how should we approach and respond to the U.S.'s debt? It's 13-some trillion and rising, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be coming down anytime soon. So how should we as Christians respond to that, as in potentially what could happen, that, who knows, we could eventually be closed off and it could almost turn post-apocalyptic in a sense or something, or people could not have, it could turn into people not having food, people not having things like, or money, people not having anything really that is necessities for life. And so how do we approach that right now in the midst of things, even though we're not at that point? What do we do now? And how do we live our lives with this debt looming over where this country that we live in? This isn't our home. We're just here temporarily, but we want to, we're told to be responsible. And so how do we, what is our role in helping this or being a part of this? So we're going to be kind of talking a little bit about that. So I want to start off with talking about some examples of famine in the Bible. So what are a few examples that are coming to your mind?
Yeah, the one where Elijah was it Elijah that was fed by the ravens? And then he went to the widow's house and provided oil and flour for them.
Yes.
Also the one with Joseph.
Yes.
And the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Which I have not seen yet, by the way. We should watch that together sometime.
Okay.
I don't know, those are the only two that come to mind. I wasn't there one during, he was one of the prophets. They lowered him down into a well or a cistern using rags.
Yes.
That they tied together.
I don't know what his name is.
I don't remember either.
I also think there's a lot of talk of, I don't know, in the prophecies as well, in the old prophets as well, like Isaiah talking about stuff, and Jeremiah, some of the other ones talking about famine in the land. And there's a lot of the world that is actually living in famine, or where they're not getting enough food and things as well.
Was it Jeremiah? I think it was the guy, whoever it was, he was known as the weeping prophet.
I don't know. Like I said, we didn't really plan a lot, so we don't have a lot of our back research. So what were some responses in the midst of those? Let's just think about the different responses to these famines, because I think there's a lot of different responses to famine in the Bible. During Elijah's time, it didn't rain for 3 years, right?
Yeah, something like that.
And then, however, that they weren't really given a warning, were they?
I don't know. I feel like every time there was a famine, there was a warning.
There's a warning, just that people didn't heed it
people
probably.
didn't usually pay attention.
But in the case of Joseph, they had 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine, and so they stored up. So there's kind of like, I don't know if you see I'm just thinking about the two different dynamics there, and how like where are we supposed to be, like how do those both relate to us, and what can we learn from both of them? And how we should live in the midst of, on the verge that could happen to us at any point in time.
I don't know. It kind of comes down to us changing the government so that they pay off the debt and stop spending and pulling money out of where it shouldn't be and put it where it should be to get it paid off. But then us as average Americans, what power do we have to do any of that except through voting? And what politician is ever going to put money into paying off the national debt by raising taxes or taking away money from programs that certain people think are necessary or like? Because he's going to lose a lot of voters and will probably not get elected.
Okay, I wasn't really thinking politics, but okay, all right.
I mean, that's something that we can do to change that. The only other thing I can think, really, is that we have to make wise financial decisions and make investments that will be around when things do finally collapse, and buy things that will be worth money once the American dollar collapses completely and our country starts to be taken over by every country that we owe money to. So we need to be able to feed and defend our own families, I would say.
See, I hear a lot of people who are like talking like, all right, they think that this is going to happen at like any time where society's going to go under in the U.S. or something like that. And so they're like, we need to get a generator. We need to get food that can last for years and years and years. All these various things. We need to find ways that we can get clean water easily, which is good. You know, getting clean water easily. Like, we should be developing that already for people who can't get clean water, because the amount of people that are dying every year from dysentery because of unclean drinking water is way, way, way too high in the world. And it's a very easily solved problem. But, like, we're, like, very much, like, I feel like a lot of people are prepping for this, like, doomsday of the U.S. where everything's going to go under, whether it be nuclear war or something, or the economy falling under, and they're like, all right, but we're ready because we got food, we got guns and bullets, and we got a generator, and we got a way to get clean water. But, like, I'm just wondering, like, personally, like, is that the proper way to go about, like, responding? And, like, I don't know. I always feel like, you know, like, is that me living in fear and timidity, or is that someone being prepped? And then, like, and if it does happen, then how do we live?
Well, that's why I think it's very valuable to have your own land, so that you can end up growing the food that you need. You can hunt the food that you need, so you don't have to be an extreme prepper like the people that have stockpiles of food that'll last for hundreds of years, or the people that have their own private bunkers and stuff. I don't know if you necessarily need to go that extreme, unless there's a fear of our country being taken over, in which point you should have a lot of guns and ammo and places to keep yourself safe and protect your family, and then do what you can to help other people. Okay, so we had some technical difficulties. The batteries on my recorder died, and I don't have a wall plug for it, so we had to change batteries. So we're going to jump back in, and hopefully we're in the right spot.
So anyway, fear and the bunkers and things like that, there's the two different sides of things where we have examples of, where you have the story of Joseph, where they were warned and they took the warning and they were well prepared. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, and they were able to survive and give out to others. But then at the same time, we have the example of Elijah with the woman who bakes him bread and gives him the last of everything that she has to him to eat, even though she has her own son to take care of. And so, like, is choosing
like one where you over prepare, is that living in fear of things, because that's kind of where I tend to lean. But at the same time, I also think that it's like, I look at that, I'd be like, that's so irresponsible. Like, you're a parent, and as somebody who, like, I'm not a parent, but I've studied parenting, I'd be like, you're like, you can't do that. You need to feed your child. Like, but we're given both examples, and then you also have with the taxes in the New Testament, Jesus, like, a lady comes up and she gives all that she has to the tax, and Jesus is like, look at that lady, and the disciples are like, she gave like 2 pennies, and and Jesus is like, yes, but she's a widow, and that is all that she had, and she gave it freely. And that was like, so there's just so many different examples. Like, where do we live in the midst of seeing these examples, and in the midst of possibly, like, I don't want us to live in fear. I don't want to live in fear that, hey, economy could collapse and we could, like, things like, and I don't even know if it's like, I'll leave that to all these speculators and things like that. I'm not gonna sit and be like, hey, this is happening or this is going to happen. But like, these are things that I've been thinking about, because my dad has started to stockpile things. He's got his own generator. He's been buying up pretty much military food packs and things like that. And so it just seems to me like that's a little extreme. And like, if that time ever did come where it was like that, I feel like I would want to, like, I don't want it to happen, but if it did happen, like, how would I want to respond? How would I want to live in the midst of it? Would I be willing to sacrifice for myself and my own family and taking away from us to give to others? Or, like, I don't know.
That reminds me a lot of the two different examples here, which don't necessarily give any clarity to this, but the what was it, the 9 virgins or the 12 virgins that were waiting for the groom, and they didn't buy enough oil for their lamps, and they fell asleep, and their lamps went out, and they had to go into town to buy more. But the virgins that were prepared actually got to go into the wedding feast because they had been prepared. They didn't have any extra to share with those who had none. It's not that they didn't want to share, but they couldn't. But they were the ones that were prepared, were ready ahead of time.
And then what's the second one?
Oh, but then there's also the example, like you said, where it's just like, yeah, just trust in God to provide whatever you need. There's the two extremes, and I think we should probably fall somewhere in the middle. We don't want to live in fear, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being prepared either.
Well, the one you're talking, the first one with the oil, I wouldn't say, hey, that's like, that one is about the kingdom of heaven, and like in response to salvation and coming, like being ready for when God comes calling, in a sense.
Translates perfectly, but it's an example of being prepared and being ready.
Yeah, but then at the same time, like, you look and like, we have this constant, like, it could be any day. It could be any day that this happens. Like, that God, that, like, Paul constantly writes that, be ready for any day for Christ could return. And, like, in that case, like, my thought process is, like, well, I should, like, be giving to the people. Like, if I have something to give, I should give it, because, like, it could be that tomorrow, and if tomorrow came and nothing happened, like, what could have came from if I had actually given that to somebody.
Yeah, and that also is another thing that I wanted to talk about is we in America live in such luxury. We have so many nice things that we don't need at all.
Yeah.
How can we justify having those nice things? Like, for example, even not things that are necessarily excessive, but just things like taking your family out to eat at a restaurant. Well, that extra money could have been given to the poor somewhere. It could have been used to save people's lives overseas. How can we justify that?
Yeah.
I think that kind of goes along the same point too, and that maybe is a discussion for a different day. But at what point are we allowed to have some comforts and prepare for the future?
Yeah. you look a lot at the Old Testament, and a lot of the prophecies, they talk about, like, God warns and he says, you guys did not take care of the poor, you did not take care of the oppressed, you did not take care of the people in need, so therefore I am casting judgment upon you because of that. And, like, in a sense, is that kind of what's happening to us? I'm not saying, hold on, but clarification, the United States is not the Christian nation of the world. Christianity is a global, and it is a global church. It is not a U.S. is where Christianity that's not where it started. It's not where it's going to end. Is a global, but God can cast judgment down on nations, and in a sense, we haven't cared for the poor. We have lived in luxury a lot, and so, like, could he not do the same thing, like, to us, to wake us up to say, hey, you guys you guys aren't caring for the poor. Look at the homeless in your streets. Look at the people around. And so, like, people are stockpiling, going, I need to prepare for this. Whereas, what if we just instead would, like, shifted our attitude to, let's go out and find and help the poor. Like, and I don't like you said, it's somewhere in the middle, but I tend to lean more towards the, like, there are people that are desperately, like, hungry and wanting food, or needing help on learning how to do a job, or to be able to get and provide for the family. Like, because here's the other thing, we do so much food stamps, we give food away to people, and those people stay on that, and we're not actually helping them get out, like, to be able to live and provide for themselves and provide for their family.
Yeah.
And I think when people have that sense of provision for their family, it encourages them to go out and do more of that. And so when they're just taking stuff for free and for granted, but at the same time, like, we gotta provide. We can't just, like, say, hey, sorry, poor, but you guys gotta give us something, or, like, no, that's not what I'm. But, like, we gotta.
That's why I think it should definitely be done by the church instead of the government, because the church is actually in the communities, and they have a handle on who needs the money and who doesn't, so that it can actually be used effectively.
Some churches are in the community. I wouldn't say all.
No, I'm saying the church, like the Christian church, like the believers who actually believe and care.
Well, we should. That's the thing, is we should care, and I feel like right now we don't. And so, like, I feel like almost as well, us being like, we need to stockpile, we're almost caring more about ourselves and less about others. Whereas you hear stories, like, you hear about history of the people from the church running face into cities where the plague was taking over as everyone else was running out, places where there was, and they would run head in, not caring about them own selves, but caring about the sick and the poor and the dying in those places. And, like, I feel like we've lost that identity in us of that caring for the poor and the needy of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is because most of us don't see homeless people on a regular basis. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind kind of a thing. We don't have to deal with unclean drinking water.
Yeah.
Everybody in the country can get clean drinking water from somewhere, whether it be a drinking fountain at a store, or a drinking fountain at a county park, or whatever it might be. Food, there's all kinds of programs. Whether or not some of the people actually need those programs is a different topic for a different day, but nobody in America, the way it's currently set up, can possibly say that they are poor, and there's no way that they should be dying of starvation, kind of thing, because of the way America's set up. So I think that our daily lives, we don't see those homeless people like exist in other countries where there is absolutely nothing that they can do. And so it's, like I said, just kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing. We don't even think about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like we should. And that's why I think it's valuable to take trips overseas, even if they're just short trips, but just to actually see the poorest of the poor and know what they're living in.
Yeah.
So I think that would help us to have more compassion and help us to give more. I also think another thing, though, is with the taxes, that goes to providing aid for other countries and food stamps and all that stuff. And so a lot of people, and kind of, I've thought this myself as well, is that I've already given my part, and the government's doing the taking care of people, which is not right, but I think that's an attitude a lot of people have.
Yeah. Or I'm giving to my church, so I don't need to.
That's another thing too.
Um,
I don't need to get out and evangelize because I'm giving money to my church to do it.
yeah. And so we've really lost this identity of being the ones to lead and to be the change. I mean, you look at some of the organizations that are in communities, like the Salvation Army, a lot of even I think the American Red Cross, a lot of these were founded by the church. I think the Red Cross was, I mean, it has the Red Cross. It has, so I've just taken a guess, but that was back in the 1850s, 1860s.
Well, a
during
good chunk of the hospitals and stuff too were started by churches.
Yeah, and we've lost that identity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about where one of these things is coming from. Like with my thinking, is I was in the Twin Cities, driving, and my car was kind of out of commission at that time, so I was driving around in my dad's Mustang. And it's not like the super nice Mustang. Like it's a affordable car. It gets good gas mileage. It gets about the same gas mileage as my car. It's just a fun car to drive, and it's a stick shift, so that makes it even more enjoyable. But this is where I'm getting at. Is I was driving through the cities, and I was on one street, and a guy was standing there with a sign, and I know people are like, you can't trust the people on the streets. It doesn't matter. I know that there are homeless people. I've done research. Majority of homeless people are veterans, and there's also a large majority of homeless people that are either families or kids as well. But anyway, so this guy was holding a sign. And he said, it said, "Vet looking for work, like need work," and I made eye contact with him as I was driving by, and just saw his face and just the lack of hope, and just this almost like a and it broke me. I saw it, and I had to pull over, and I started weeping, because I was just like, who am I to be driving around in this car? Like, I am so blessed. I have so much wealth. I can go into my pantry and grab food. Everyone in my family has jobs that they could work for and do this. I've never truly experienced what true poverty is even like. I've never had to worry about not having food or things like that. And this guy looked completely hopeless in that, and was on the side of a road begging for work, begging for food. And it just it broke me. And I still have not figured out how to reconcile, what can I do to go and help, or to help those people, because the solution isn't yeah, I can give food and I can help them out, but how can I give them, because I can give them bread every day, but what about, the old saying goes, teach a man to, or give a man a fish, he's not hungry for a day. Teach a man for fish, and he can provide, or I don't even know, but it's essentially like that. Give a man a fish, and
he'll eat for a day. Teach him to fish, and he'll eat for a lifetime.
Yeah, and
that's the thing too, is we see these homeless people, but then we also know that McDonald's down the street is hiring, so why doesn't he get a job there, and at least start doing something? I think I'm not saying that there are not homeless people that need help, but I think a lot of times we have that idea of, or that attitude of, well, why doesn't he just go get a job? Because we all know there's plenty of jobs available. We always see hiring signs everywhere. And then coming from the background I have, having worked in a prison and now working in a jail, I see all these people come in over and over and over again on drug charges and all kinds of stuff, who are living off of food stamps, who could have a good job, but they're just wasting their money and they're just leeching off of society, and they've never done anything productive for society ever. And you develop an attitude of, well, why are my tax dollars paying for that? And you come to mistrust everybody that's asking for money on the streets. And
whereas we should be like, okay, how can I go to them?
Well, yeah, I think we should be approaching that in a different way, but talking more immediately about the actual homeless people that actually do need help. How do we tell who they are and what they need and know that they really need it, so we can actually give our money to people who actually are going to use it?
I don't know. My dad once told me, he said, we're not called to make the judgment on whether someone deserves it or not. We're called to make the judgment. We're called to give. And so I remember one time my dad was at a gas station in my hometown. I'm not going to name it because we don't want people creeping on us.
We don't want stalkers.
But anyways, so he said,
I think we're going to get more stalkers by being ambiguous about everything.
Well, they know. I said the Twin Cities. They can take a guess on if we're in the Midwest or if or if I was in just visiting there.
Yeah. So we're probably 1,000 miles of the Twin
Just
Cities.
kidding. They can probably tell where we're from just from our speaking accents. But anyway, getting back to the story is this couple was sitting there outside the gas station, and I will say this, like my family like fought hard. Like we weren't poor, but we weren't like well off either. Like it was probably, we were above the poverty range, like, but still like, and so with that, and then with my parents' divorce, there just wasn't a lot of money around, and so my dad was driving this old Ford Escort that was like, you had to use a screwdriver to turn it on. You didn't even have a key to turn it on.
I heard stories about this thing.
And the brakes would randomly seize up, and also there were all sorts of things. It randomly just shut off on you. Like you had to drive. It was an automatic car that you had to treat like a manual. I had a lot of fun with the car. We called it the Mini Mystery Machine. But anyway, so this car was not like the best thing. But these people were like, "Hey, we need gas to get back to Milwaukee," and my dad was like, "Okay." So we went over to their car, filled it up, or put in like, I don't know how many gallons. It was probably about 10 gallons, maybe enough to get them halfway to Milwaukee or to get them there or something. And he went up to them and he said, "Hey, I went and put gas in your tank," and he went out and they said, "What did you do that for? We didn't need gas. We needed money." And he said, and he got really frustrated with them. He was like, "Do you see my car?" He was like, "You're driving an Escalade. I have this car over here." But he was unhesitant to give, and he gave freely, even though truly they probably didn't need it. Their hearts were they were greedy, but he gave anyways, and he trusted that like, hey, like God's gonna provide even though I gave that away, or He's gonna use that in some way, or He's gonna do that, this or that. And He didn't make the judgment.
Yeah.
But and I know that for us that's like really hard because we watch people squander and squander and squander. And yes, that's why we need to be involved, and we don't just give like, and then we're like, all right, we gave so that we give and then we go and are involved. Like imagine if we gave to a community and then we went into the midst of the community to see where the money went and to teach and to build. But currently all we do is we give and we go on good faith. Even though most of the organizations that we give to, 10 cents of a dollar is making it to where it's going. The rest is getting taken out because we aren't thoughtful. We're just like, all right, well, I'm just going to give because then I can clear my conscience, rather than I'm going to give and invest because I have this, I love these people and I need to this is burning on my heart to see them helped, not just my conscience cleared.
Mm-hmm. On that same note of it's not our job to judge, I think God rewards us for faith and not necessarily for being the most effective, but we did what we could based upon the knowledge that we had. So like your dad there did the right thing, but that's not sustainable for us to keep doing that for every homeless person that we see. You know, to just keep constantly throwing money at everybody that claims to need money. So we have to still be wise about it too.
That's where the investing comes in. Being involved in the community. If we completely separate and we separate away from the needs, then we don't actually know the needs. So we would just be blindly giving. But if we're invested, we know what the needs are.
Mm-hmm. What were we talking about before you brought that story up?
We were talking about giving.
Yeah, where were we going with that though?
I was talking about how I had, like, where kind of my brokenness, or where I was kind of like with my encounter with seeing, like, making eye contact with the guy.
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know.
Because you were talking about how you, since you work in a jail and a prison, you've seen you've seen this, and it's really, you kind of have this attitude of seeing, like, I see these people squander in their attitudes.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously it's about where our heart is and trying to help people, but at the same time we also want to make sure we're as effective as possible. So if we're just giving money to a random person who needs it all the time, we're going to run out of money, and probably that money's not being used effectively. So I think we still need to be smart about what we're doing and what we're giving money to, and we can't necessarily know everybody's situation because they're not always from our community or whatever. And so that kind of comes down to
So if somebody came up to you on the street and said, hey, like, I need money, can you give me $30? Like, how would you respond to that?
I'd ask them what they need it for.
And if they said, I need it for my family, to provide for my family, what would your response be then?
I think I would start going into a conversation about what their situation is, why they need the money.
What if they said, I need $30 right now. I need to run the bus over there. Like, I need it now so I can run and catch that. So you had to make the split-second decision of between, you only had 10 seconds, and in those 10 seconds they either and after those 10 seconds they run away.
That would, I think, would be more of a situation where I would just let the Holy Spirit guide me and tell me what to do, whether or not it was right.
So why not do that in both situations?
Yeah. That's a good point. What were we talking about that brought us to this, though?
We were talking about famine and the brokenness.
Well, yeah, that originally, but we were going down a path of helping the poor out, and that should be the job of, I think, the church, because the church, as in all Christians, because we live in the communities, we know what needs to be done, all that stuff. Oh, we were talking about these are the attitudes and these are the reasons that people don't give and they don't do that stuff because of that. So I think we were talking about what holds people back from giving, and I think those are the things. Those are the reasons.
Mistrust?
Yes. Mostly mistrust in all the examples that we see around us. So, we were getting at a point here. Obviously, we need to start getting into our communities more.
Yes, that is very true.
But let's bring it back to our original topic of, should we be giving everything away that we have, or should we be preparing for the future? I think on one hand, we need to trust God to provide for us, and we should have that faith, but I also think He wants us to be reasonable and not just throw everything away.
Is it Solomon in Ecclesiastes who writes,
He who waters shall be watered himself?
No, like, what good is it to have money if in the end, like, there's no one to give it to, in a sense? That's essentially what, like, you know, in the end, what, like, imagine Job. Like, Job loses his entire family, but he had all this money, and then he dies. Like, what good would that be?
Uh-huh.
Or, like, in the same with King Solomon. Like, if he didn't get to distribute that out to other people.
Yeah, but he also lived in extreme wealth as well. So at what point are we living in too much comfort and luxury? I mean, should we be giving everything away and living on the bare minimum possible?
I think that we definitely live in some of the highest luxury in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. But at what point does it become too much?
I would say at the point where we begin to lose sight of the poor. I would say that the gap between us and the poor is ever widening, and it's beginning to get easier and easier to not see the poor and to ignore them.
Now, is that because we are overly rich and we don't care, or is it just because we don't see examples of the extreme poor every day?
I would say both.
We're not living in third world countries. We don't see the people that are living on nothing.
But even the poor. I mean, yes, the poor in our country are richer than the poor anywhere else.
Yep.
But still, like, there are homeless people in our communities that some of which, some yes, they are abusing drugs or this or that, but others they just don't have financial. They haven't been taught financial responsibility, so they don't know how, and so they've gotten evicted a few times, and nobody will accept them in, or things like that. And so there are things like that where we don't see them because we're not looking, because we like it, we're comfortable with the way we are. We don't want to go out and look for them, even though they are there. I would say in a town of 30 people, there's probably a homeless person. In a town of 300, in a town of 3,000, all the way up to a town of 1 million, there are homeless people in each of those scenarios. We just choose to not go looking for them.
So, what should you and I do tomorrow to help the poor people in our areas?
Exactly.
That's something I've thought about a lot. I don't know what the answer is.
Exactly. That is, and that's a question that far too little people are asking.
So we need to get more people asking it, but then we should also try to find an answer to that question. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
We need to get the church more involved.
What do we do in our communities? What can we...
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the other thing is...
Well, that's another thing, too, is should we be giving our money to the people in our own communities, or should we be giving our money to people overseas who actually desperately need it?
Well, this is... Like I said earlier, so much money, like, that we give, like, to these organizations who are like, we're out to help these people. Mm-hmm. 10%, 10 cents of a dollar in some cases is making it there. Mm-hmm. And then, again, all we're doing is giving a fish. Like, we need to teach.
We need to build things that are sustainable.
We need to teach people how to farm, or we need to get them the resources in order so that they can sustainably farm, or things like that.
There are also people, though, who just desperately need that money right now. They need that food right now, or they need medical attention right now. So I don't think we should just not give because it's not something that's sustainable.
But at the same time, like, we do need to research. We need to know what people are telling us. Like,
yeah. When I went over to Malawi, Africa, I went over to see a guy named Greg Glyer who used to run a YouTube channel called Bad Missionary, and he was actually living in Malawi, which is a third world country. He was teaching at the Bible college there, but he would go out into the villages. You know, the capital city of Lilongwe is a pretty decent city. I mean, it's not near the city itself is not nearly as nice as even some of the worst cities I've seen in America. Like, there's just garbage everywhere. There's a lot of poor people, and the roads are not in great shape. But they have got a lot of nice stuff there too. They've got clean drinking water, and the grocery store that they have is just as nice as any grocery store we'd have here. And there's a lot of people that are just they're living, and they've got a little bit of disposable income. And then, not a 20-minute drive from the city, there are, and if you include like an hour drive, there are literally hundreds of villages of people living in dirt huts who have no jobs. They're just farming off the land. They have no disposable income, and they're just trying to scrape an existence out of the rocks, so to speak. And I think it's people like that who are actually in the countries dealing with those people every day, who know what needs to be done in the communities and work with locals to develop, sustainable options for, helping the poor. And that was a big thing of his, and so he started the organization called DonorSee, which is an app where different aid workers and missionaries around the world can post needs and fund projects and stuff like that. And that's why I think that's a huge thing, is they take a very, very small percentage of the money compared to some of the bigger corporations, because that was one of his frustrations, is things like the Red Cross or some of these huge organizations that they've got so many employees and so many people that need to be paid. And so he started this company where they're just taking a very, very small percentage just for their operating costs, because they had to develop the app, and they've got people, investors and stuff that got involved. They had to pay a few small employees, so they take a very small percentage, but the majority of that money actually goes to helping the poor people. And I think that there needs to be more of that going on, more people actually on the ground in the country who actually know what needs to happen, and there needs to be more ways of getting money to them effectively. So I don't know where we're going now, but I think there needs to be more of that happening.
Yeah.
And how do we do that research, though, to find out who needs what?
Yeah.
It has to be a trusted source, and it has to be a company like that
Yeah.
that takes very little, the minimal operating costs.
Yeah. Now, but some of you guys might be going, wait a minute, you guys have gone way far off from the topic that you started on. But I would say this is all very related, because, there are people who are living in the scenario that we were talking about earlier every day. And that's kind of what we got into, is that, we have a lot here. And so for people, like a lot of people in the church prepping, and a lot of people, and I think that if we just stopped worrying so much about ourselves and we started thinking about others around us, like we could stockpile, and then we could give that away to others, and we could use our resources to fill off. Like one thing, I know you and I both admire Rich Mullins.
Mm-hmm.
And Rich Mullins lived, like, he was a musician. He made, I don't know, you never knew really how much he actually made, because he said, I want to live on the average person's salary. And then he gave everything else away.
Mm-hmm. He said that he never actually knew how much he was making, because there was a board at his church of several people that just got together and distributed his money where it needed to go, and they gave him the average salary of an average American. Yeah. The rest of it went to help the poor.
And I just, think about that, is there, and I know a lot of people would be like, man, you're thinking so hard, like I'll give where I can, but what if we did optimize our giving? It says in the book of Acts that the church came together after Pentecost, and they brought all of their stuff together, and they gave as was needed, and they were giving to people all over the place. And that was something that defined the churches. People would give freely. They were caring less about their own needs and caring more about the needs of each other. And I just think that if we began to foster that heart, we would be less worried about this debt that is looming over us. We'd be less worried. We shouldn't be worried. We have a Father in heaven who owns everything and can give abundantly and freely, and maybe he's just holding back because he wants to watch us step out in faith and give out. And then he's just going to let it flood in, not to make us rich, but to provide for the people that we're seeking to help out.
Yeah, and it talks about that in Proverbs too. Like I said, I think it's Proverbs, maybe Ecclesiastes, but he who waters shall be watered himself. And I found that myself too. That the more I am generous, the more blessings I receive from God.
So
that's not the prosperity gospel, but being generous, it definitely is doesn't go unrewarded.
Paul in Philippians says, I've learned to live with much, and I've learned to live with little. And says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I really don't like when people take that verse out of context. But I feel like that this is that's kind of what Paul's talking about. Is he's requesting the church of Philippi to like give him aid, and he's saying, hey, like, I can live with a lot, I can live with a little. Like God has given me the opportunity to live in both, and he's gonna work in me, and he's gonna do this. Now I'm just asking you to think about that for yourself as well, and for the work of the kingdom, because that's ultimately what should be driving our decisions. It's not about providing for ourselves. It's not about this or that. It's about the work for the kingdom. Is it not? Like that's what our lives define. That's why we are out making money, is for the sake of the kingdom. Like it's God allowing us to work and make money for the sake of the kingdom. It's that way.
So, what can we do about it tomorrow, though? What programs are in place in our communities that we can know, we can trust to actually distribute that money where it needs to go, and it doesn't just go into greedy people's pockets?
Well, one thing I think that, first of all, what we need to do is we need to track where our money goes. Like, our individual money. Like, what are we spending it on? Like, and I'm not saying, hey, we need to be minimalist, but we need to track, we need to think, we need to honestly think about, like, where our purchases are going to. Is like, because if it's, put your money where your mouth is. Like, if I'm going to say that I'm a Christian, I care about the poor, is my money going to the poor? Is it going to help them? Or is it going to help me? Am I number one?
That's what I'm saying. What can we do right now to get into the communities and start giving to those people?
That's what I'm saying. We got to track our money, and then we can go and start looking for those things. But then once we know where our money's going, and we can begin to look and optimize and begin to pray and ask God, what can I give up? And when God says, hey, you can give this up, and we can go, man, I like that car. We could be, all right, but I'm going to get rid of it because I feel that this is what you're calling me to. Or, man, I like that vacation trip that cost $1 bajillion. And God's like, well, you can do something a little cheaper or something like that. And then with that money, we can look into organizations. We can do Google searches. We can go and talk to the people that are running them. I think there are things in our community that we can look for and we can find and we can get plugged in with. There are homeless shelters that we can contact. I'm pretty sure there's some around here.
Yeah, I don't even know what kind of charity organizations are in our area.
There are places where women can come who are escaping abusive relationships. Get involved there, because those women need help. That's a troubling thing to come out of, and usually they're coming out of it with no money, and they need help. There are tons of. One thing is we have a reservation near us, and there's a lot of brokenness there. There's a lot of brokenness in families. I don't know.
Well, some of it is giving money, and some of it is actually just spending time with people and helping them to develop the skills that they need.
I would say one thing also that we can do is have this conversation in our churches. Call people to wake up. We need to study some Old Testament prophets. Let ourselves be punched in the gut for how we are for how we're living.
Yeah.
We don't like to be told we're wrong. we don't like change either.
Ain't that the truth? So, I guess for me, I'm gonna start praying about this and figuring out, because I know, even without tracking where all my money goes, I know a good chunk of it goes to things like buying nice food, or fancy toys, camera equipment, things like that I don't necessarily need to be spending money on, and I could be putting it towards other things. So that's what I'm gonna start doing, is praying about where that can go. And the hard part is being open to the answers that I may get back.
Ain't that the truth?
What I may have to give up. So that's what I'm going to start doing. Because this is something I have thought about many, many times, but I've never... You're always like, okay, that was good discussing that. And then you're like, all right, now I need to think about it. I'm just going to think. And when we say think, we honestly mean, all right, I'm going to try and forget about this. Yes, exactly. I've actually been kind of convicted by our conversation here, so I'm going to see what I can do.
We got to hold each other accountable to this.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm going to start given more to donor C, because that's something I really believe in.
Hmm.
You can actually see where your money's going, and you see, they'll post updates and videos and pictures of the progress of the project, so you can actually see where it's going for. And it's an organization that I trust, actually having gone over and visited Gret in Africa and getting to see it and knowing it's not just a scam. He's not someone who's just trying to grab your money.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I'm going to start doing right away.
Yeah. And there are things out there where you can look up organizations. Any nonprofit organization, I think, is in there's like directories, and they rate, like, they have a whole list, like, oh, okay, what's the average amount that actually reaches what you're trying to do. So look and try and find those things. Like, you can see the numbers right there on things, usually on organizations, if you're looking for an organization to give.
So I guess the conclusion that we've come to as far as preparing is I don't think it's a bad thing to be prepared, but I think we need to
do a better job of being in the heart of having the heart of the woman.
I guess most of the famines that occurred were a result of Israel's bad behavior, so to speak, with the people around them, and the time. Where are they going with that?
I don't know if the one with Joseph. I think that one was.
I was just going to say, the one that they were actually warned and given a chance to prepare for, I don't think was in response to I guess I don't know what Israel was really doing at that time period. But that
twiddling their thumbs.
That was one that they were prepared for.
And it wasn't actually them that was prepared.
That's true.
It was Egypt, who is not a godly nation.
Uh-huh. Oh wait.
Talk about a humbling experience.
They weren't the nation of Israel at that point though either, because
that was just Jacob and his kids. Jacob and sons.
Yeah. A lot of the famines that we hear about were in the context of the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
And at that point, Israel was not a nation yet, so
yeah.
I guess what I was saying doesn't really hold up.
But still, I mean, Jacob, he had a pretty big family and, household.
Yeah, I think that a lot of, I don't know, it seems like that one didn't seem like it was a punishment. It was one where they were warned ahead of time and they were able to prepare for it. I don't know. And are we comfortable saying that the famines that have occurred throughout the Bible were a punishment for something? I don't know enough about them to say that.
They're at least there. They've happened, and there are things to learn from, and they're a teaching thing. I mean,
so we're still struggling with that question of, should we prepare for the future or should we give everything away? There was that story of the rich young ruler who came to Jesus and asked him what he needed to do, and he said, sell everything you have and give to the poor.
Yeah.
Are we all called to do that, or was that something that rich young ruler needed because he was rich and that was something that was holding him back?
But is our wealth holding us back from fully surrendering to Christ?
Mm-hmm.
That's a question that I think everyone in the U.S. needs to ask and answer is.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent it probably does affect everybody in the U.S. But then that also brings us to the question of, what are we allowed to have as far as comforts?
Nothing.
We should live at our job, or work at our job, and then go live on the streets and give everything away.
And I've read about some people that do that. There's a guy I think it's in Philadelphia, that has started an organization that's done that. Down in Milwaukee, there was a lady, she just died this last year. For 60 years, she ran a soup kitchen, and she was all of her stuff was from donations and all this, and she was like, I just want to help the people of the city. And that was what she did. She lived off of the donations and off the clothes that people donated, and she was there just to help out people. Mm-hmm. And I know some people that are wealthy, and they are responsible, and they give, and they are very passionate about giving. Like, I know some doctors who will give a lot of their income to help people out, and they are very involved. And so, I mean, it really is between you and God, and what. Mm-hmm. But it's about saying yes to God.
Yeah. I guess that's what it all comes down to, is praying and being willing to
Yeah.
accept the
Are we-
answer that is given to you.
Are we going to be obedient in the response? So this one kind of went all over the place, but I felt like we had, like, that's kind of what Unscripted is about. It's about getting off of where we're at and getting to what we really are thinking.
Uh-huh. Yep. We don't claim to be experts at anything.
Yeah, we're not as very as shown from this episode.
As is very apparent.
But we are two guys that want to grow and that want to see change in our lives and in lives around us.
The intro is supposed to be a lot shorter than this, John.
All right, we're giving you. It's for those people that only have a little bit of time. They can only listen to the intro.
Yeah. Okay.
They have a 30-second drive to work.